She was down to her last few dollars, a handful of vegetables, and a heart that had grown used to disappointment, but what happened that evening would quietly shift the course of her entire life. Welcome to Storytelling and Beyond, where ordinary lives unravel into extraordinary stories that stir the soul. Today's story is about a struggling single mother, a bowl of warm soup, and a neighbor whose gratitude would echo far beyond what anyone could have imagined. The snow had started falling early that afternoon, blanketing the small Michigan town in thick silence. Emily Carter sat on the worn-down couch of her one-bedroom apartment, watching as the window frosted over and the chill crept under the door. Her daughter Lily, barely 7, sat on the floor with a single crayon left in her hand, doodling on scraps of junk mail. It had been one of those weeks. The kind where the fridge hummed louder than usual, perhaps to make up for how empty it was inside. Emily had just enough left to make a modest soup: potatoes, carrots, a single onion. Not nearly enough to call it a meal, but enough to stretch hope into another day. She tried to hum while she cooked, as if the sound could fill the quiet ache that came from too many months of scraping by. Emily had been on her own since her husband's accident 2 winters ago. Life since then had become a series of almost enough food, almost enough rent, almost enough strength. Just as she ladled the last bit of soup into 2 chipped bowls, there came a faint knock at the door. Not loud. Almost embarrassed. Emily looked at Lily, who was already halfway to the door in her fuzzy socks. Standing there was Mr. Henderson. He was a thin, elderly man who lived alone in the apartment down the hall. Quiet, always polite, but barely seen. His breath made clouds in the air between them, and his eyes looked unsure, apologetic. "I'm sorry to bother," he said, voice trembling. I haven't eaten today. My heater gave out, and I wasn't sure who else." Emily blinked, caught between instinct and circumstance. There was barely enough soup for herself and Lily. But then Lily looked up at her with those earnest, wide eyes. "Mama," she said softly, "we have 3 bowls, right?" That simple sentence cracked something open in Emily's chest. She nodded. Without hesitation, they welcomed Mr. Henderson inside. Lily laid out her school napkin like it was fine linen. Emily split the soup into 3 small servings, quietly praying that kindness would somehow multiply it. As they sat together around the small table, something shifted. The silence that had filled Emily's life for months, the thick, isolating silence of grief and survival, began to melt. Mr. Henderson smiled for the first time in a long while. He told them about his late wife, how they used to slow dance in the kitchen. He complimented Lily's crayon drawings, even asking if he could keep one. The soup was thin, but the moment was rich. Emily went to bed that night not with a heavy heart, but a full one, realizing that sometimes, the comfort we give others is the very healing we need for ourselves. And in that quiet apartment, something beautiful had just begun. The next morning, Emily awoke to something she hadn't felt in a long time: lightness. Not because the bills had disappeared or because food had magically filled the fridge. But because for once, she didn't feel completely alone. Lily was still asleep, wrapped like a burrito in the only thick blanket they owned. Emily slipped out of bed, careful not to wake her, and tiptoed into the kitchen. She was planning to warm up the tiny bit of soup they'd saved for breakfast, just enough to get by. As she stirred the pot, a knock came again. Not timid this time. Firmer. Emily opened the door to find Mr. Henderson standing there once more, but he wasn't alone. Beside him was a woman. Tall, neatly dressed, with a kind but curious expression. She looked vaguely familiar, like someone Emily had seen once in the local paper. Her coat was expensive, but her eyes were warm. "This is my daughter, Meredith," Mr. Henderson said, smiling. "She flew in from Chicago when she heard I wasn't doing so well, and I told her about you." Emily blinked, startled. "Told her about me?" "I told her about the soup, and the warmth. The first kindness I've felt in months." Meredith extended her hand. "My father's not one to exaggerate, Miss Carter. And he's rarely speechless. But last night, he called me and cried. He said he met an angel." Emily flushed, not knowing what to say. Meredith continued, I work with a nonprofit that helps seniors and struggling families. We're not a charity exactly, we partner with people who show exceptional empathy, who remind the world what real community looks like. My father believes you're one of those people. Emily's heart skipped. Meredith pulled a folder from her purse. We want to help you. Not just financially. We want to offer you training, a part-time job that leads to full employment. And if you're willing, we'd like you to help us deliver meals and check-ins for others in this building who are silently suffering. Emily stared at her, stunned. Why me? Because, Mr. Henderson said softly, you gave what little you had, without expecting anything in return. That's the rarest kind of wealth. Tears welled in Emily's eyes. For so long, her days had felt like survival. But in one quiet evening of soup and listening, her life had been noticed, her kindness seen. She wasn't invisible anymore. That morning, as Meredith left her contact details and promised to return with groceries and paperwork, Emily stood in the doorway with Mr. Henderson, watching the snow melt slowly off the windowsills. And for the first time in years, she wasn't wondering how she'd make it to the next day. She was wondering how many others she could help make it too. The following week unfolded like a dream Emily never dared to imagine. Each morning, she woke to a stocked kitchen, not extravagant, but filled with basics she hadn't had in months: eggs, fresh bread, even a few apples for Lily's school snacks. Meredith and her nonprofit had delivered more than groceries, they had given Emily dignity. Hope. But it wasn't the food that brought Emily to tears on that Wednesday morning. It was the uniform. Folded neatly on the small table by the window was a soft blue polo shirt embroidered with the nonprofit's name, Hearts in Action. Beneath it was a name tag. Emily Carter, Outreach Assistant. She ran her fingers over the stitching, disbelief shimmering in her eyes. Her first official day had arrived. Mr. Henderson waited for her outside the apartment door, wearing a light jacket and holding 2 warm thermoses. First stop, Mrs. Eddington. She's just 3 doors down. She lost her husband last year and hasn't spoken to anyone since. Emily followed him, heart pounding not with fear, but with a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. Lily had already left for school, wearing her warmest coat, a gift from Meredith's team. When they reached Mrs. Eddington's door, Emily knocked gently. No answer. She glanced at Mr. Henderson, who offered an encouraging nod. She tried again. The door creaked open. A fragile woman with silver curls and trembling hands peeked out. Her eyes, once bright, now seemed dulled by sorrow. Good morning, Mrs. Eddington, Emily said softly. I brought some warm soup and a bit of bread, thought we could sit for a few minutes, if you're up to it. Mrs. Eddington hesitated, her lips parting slightly. Who are you? I'm a neighbor, and someone who understands what it feels like to be alone. Something shifted in the woman's eyes, just a flicker of curiosity, a wisp of trust. She stepped aside. That morning turned into something sacred. Not because Emily said anything profound, but because she listened. To stories of a husband lost to cancer, a wedding in 1964, the silence of an empty apartment. By the time Emily returned to her own place, she had visited 3 more neighbors, each one in need of something more than food. They needed connection. She was exhausted but alive in a way she hadn't felt in years. Later that evening, Lily curled beside her on the couch, munching on a peanut butter sandwich. Mom, she said through a mouthful, are you famous now? Emily laughed. Not at all, sweetheart. But you're helping people. That's kind of like being a superhero, right? Emily smiled, kissed the top of Lily's head, and whispered, maybe the world just needs more people trying to be kind. Outside, snow began falling again, but inside, there was warmth, laughter, and the beginning of something beautiful. Emily hadn't just gotten a job, she had found her calling. The months that followed unfolded like a gentle sunrise after a long, cold night. Emily became a steady light in the lives of many across the neighborhood, delivering food, sitting with the lonely, helping single mothers fill out job applications, and laughing with elderly veterans over cups of lukewarm tea. Word spread quickly about her warmth and tenacity, and more people joined Hearts in Action. What started as a small, quiet movement began blooming into a community-wide effort. But the biggest change happened quietly, almost imperceptibly, within Emily herself. One Saturday afternoon, she and Lily were invited to speak at a local fundraiser hosted by a group of business owners supporting community outreach. Emily had never spoken in front of a crowd before. Her palms sweated, and her voice trembled at first. But when she looked out and saw the faces, Mrs. Eddington, Mr. Henderson, the bakery owner who had once offered her unsold bread, and of course, Meredith, something shifted. She told her story. Not with pity, but with purpose. About the night she cooked a simple meal for her elderly neighbor, thinking she had nothing left to give. About how that one small act cracked open a door to something greater than she ever imagined. About how her daughter, Lily, reminded her daily that love wasn't measured in wealth or luxury, but in kindness and courage. The room went silent when she finished. Then came the applause, not loud and boisterous, but long and heartfelt. After the event, a woman in a pressed blazer approached her. "Emily, I run a program training community leaders in underprivileged areas. I think you'd be perfect to join. Full scholarship. Part-time, so you can still work." Emily's breath caught. This wasn't just about helping anymore. It was about growing, leading, becoming the person she'd almost forgotten she could be. Back home that evening, Lily danced around their living room, clutching a certificate the organizers had given them. "Look, Mama. It has your name. You're a real speaker now." Emily picked her up and twirled her gently. "No, sweetie. We did this together. All of it." Later, after Lily drifted off to sleep, Emily stepped onto their small balcony. The city was quiet, stars peeking through the winter sky. She closed her eyes and whispered a quiet thank you to the universe, to Meredith, to her grandfather whose old house sheltered their rebirth, and to that first bowl of stew she had almost talked herself out of making. In giving from what little she had been given everything. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was thriving. And through her journey, a quiet reminder echoed for anyone willing to hear it. Sometimes, the smallest act of kindness becomes the greatest turning point in someone's life. This is Storytelling and Beyond, where ordinary hearts create extraordinary change. Don't forget to subscribe, and let compassion lead your story too.